Hello friends, this is Lily. Welcome back to another tutorial. Feathers are great to paint on DIY greeting cards, as journal elements, or just as fun little pieces to fill your sketchbook with. They can be kind of intimidating to paint if you've never done them before. Today I'm going to show you some incredibly simple ways to quickly paint some beautiful feathers. I'm just doing some fun colors here, so I decided to use blue and yellow for the first feather. I'm using a bit of yellow for the bottom left of the feather, and most of the feather is going to be blue. For the right side of the feather, I'm using only blue, and for the left side, I'm doing a gradient from blue to yellow. So after layering down the blue elements, I've added the yellow and just blended the two colors where they meet. And on the very bottom, this is where the soft bits of the feather is. We just use a very small brush and gently drag them outwards from the center. And now to create some texture for the feather, using the same brush, I'm just gently drawing some lines from the middle of the feather and also along the outside. Now I'm going to create the base for the second feather. I am going to go back to that first one after a bit, but since we're doing these in layers, some of the effects are much better once the base layer has dried. This is a brown feather and the tip of the feather is rounded, so using the same technique, we're creating the soft bits of the feather on the very bottom and just kind of fan out a little bit. Some of it will come into the main feather a bit. For the third feather, I kind of combined some elements from the first and the second piece. I'm using blue and yellow here and just gently blending the two colors where they meet. I wanted to add a third color, so I'm doing a little bit of orange and starting from the bottom and blending that into the yellow color. This feather is quite a bit smaller than the first two, just for a little change in variety. And we're just creating that little fanned feathered effect on the bottom. After the base layer, I decided to go up and kind of darken the blue a little bit, as well as creating a little texture at the top. Using a brown color, I'm still using the small brush and just drawing one line from the center all the way to the bottom of the feather. And using the same brush and color, I'm creating some texture near the bottom by just drawing these very thin lines in a diagonal direction. Now that the base layer for the second feather is fully dry, I'm taking a brush with a much darker brown and going back to create some stripes on the second feather. You'll notice that for most of these stripes, I'm actually going in a downward direction. This just helps further create that feathery texture. I have been using mostly the same materials for my recent videos, but if this is your first time here, I am using the Winsor & Newton 14 color watercolor set, a number 5 micron pen, and a couple of color journaling liner pens for this painting. You can find the links to these in the description section below if you'd like to use the same material and follow along with this painting. Once I'm done with the stripes, I'm just going to use the same pen and the same color or slightly darker color to draw that center line all the way down the middle of the feather to the bottom. You can use the same pen and color to add a little texture through the bottom and different parts of the feather. For the fourth feather, I decided red should be the color since we haven't used it yet. Now I'm just using a flat brush, medium sized, to lay on the base, and then using a smaller brush, I'm just adding a second layer of red, a little bit darker this time, to create that gradient. So the top of the feather is going to be quite a bit darker than the bottom. Now, feathers are imperfect things in nature and they don't have to be symmetrical. So you notice that the shape of this feather is quite a bit jagged around the two sides. And I left out a little bit of white in the center, and that's where the center line is going to be. Now taking a smaller brush, I'm doing the same on the bottom, and just fan out those little soft bits on the bottom. Now when I first started drawing these feathers, I thought, oh, maybe I'll do 5 feathers on this page, and it turns out I have quite a bit of space here, so I think I'm going to try to fit 6 feathers on this page. So for the 5th one, I'm also doing little stripes, and I wanted to try a different method. So I'm doing the stripes first, the darker portions. I decided to make the areas between the stripes a light blue color, and completing that feather with a line down the center, making it more feather-like. And now onto the last feather. We're going to come back to the other feathers in a bit. So this is a dark brown feather, and there's going to be a gradient. I actually made this area very wet compared to the other feathers, so it can have this softer effect. And I'm just finishing up the bottom with a little bit of that soft feathery look. I then go back to darken the top of the feather a little bit more. Now for this particular feather, I didn't wait for it to dry before going on top and doing another layer, because that's the effect that I kind of wanted, is that soft feel, the wet on wet painting. While that's drying, I'm going back to add a little more texture on the second feather. These journaling pens are really quite handy. They're very fine lines and you can use it for a lot of detail work. I'm highlighting the center of the feathers with a Gelly Roll pen. Now at this point I feel pretty good with the watercolor layer, so I'm going ahead and using the liner pen to add a little more extra detail and texture to the feathers. Using a number 5 micron pen, I'm just outlining each of the feathers and adding a little extra texture. The blue on this feather didn't really stand out enough for me, so I decided to add on another layer. Now that the last feather is dry, we're using the Gelly Roll pen and adding on the little dots on the top of the feather. Now using a number 5 micron pen, we're going to draw the center of the feather. We're also going to add some texture on top of the watercolor layer, including those white dots. For the ink layer of the texture, you can just follow the same direction as the texture below it. Now I'm just going around and doing the same for all the other feathers. You can emphasize a little bit more with the ink pen on one side of the feather to create that shadow near the center. I hope you enjoyed creating these cute little feathers with me. I certainly had a really fun time making these. Don't forget to subscribe and click that bell button to turn on notifications so you can see upcoming art videos. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.